Good evening and welcome to Bring Back the Brass. This is our regular Monday night chat from our Brass Band Foundations team. Brass Foundations is Brass Band England's new project, basically designed to get more people, more young people, playing brass instruments. And I'm delighted to be joined this evening by Anri Adachi, musical director of Nailsworth Band in Gloucestershire, teacher, pianist, and double bassist extraordinaire. Hi, Anri.
Hello. How are you, Paul?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's good to have you here. It's great just to chat to. I'm always interested in people who have come into the brass band world. A lot of us were kind of born into it and grew up with it, and I'm always curious about what attracts other people from other parts of the musical universe to come and join us in our strange little corner of that musical world. So a piano player, a cellist, a double bass player.
Yes.
How did you end up as musical director of Nailsworth Brass Band?
That's a very good question. As far as brass players are concerned, I kind of really didn't even realise they existed until I got to university. Obviously, we had brass players in our orchestras and things, but as far as I knew, they just had about 300 bars rest, and then they'd split it, and then they'd go off to the pub. No.
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah. All joking aside, when I got to university, I met Philip there, and I'd never even heard of a tenor horn, which is what he played. I've never seen one before because it's an instrument that's only in the brass band and not in the orchestral world. I'd never heard of it. And he kind of introduced me into that world. I think my first experience was going to the national finals and listening to Sun Life playing The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea. And I was absolutely blown away by the level of virtuosity, the strangeness of a contest where everybody plays the same piece. But I thought that was really interesting, actually, being able to compare the exact same piece played by lots of different bands and how different that sounded depending on obviously the ability of the players, but also the interpretation of the music directors. So you never really get that opportunity to compare pieces in that way in other musical walks of life.
No, certainly not in a live situation. I mean, listen, building your record collection on Radio 3 on a Saturday morning, and they'll give you 5 different versions. Oh, I think that's what it's called. It's very trendy now, to have vinyl. All the young hip people are getting vinyl back.
If you say it's trendy, it must be true.
Absolutely, you know me. But yeah, it's usually recorded stuff that we can listen to Bernstein's recording of Mahler 2, and we can listen to Maren Alsop's recording of Mahler 2, and we can look at that. But doing it in a live situation, yeah, I can see how coming across that the first time must have been quite,
Yeah, it was really, really amazing. And then just that understanding that all I was looking at there was the kind of equivalent of the Premier League, and that there were all of these other bands as well, and this huge structure of brass bands that went right down to sort of children, and I thought that was incredible. And the way that people get pulled into brass banding is so different from orchestral playing.
Yeah.
Really, you have to be quite well heeled to play an orchestral instrument. Your parents have to be able to pay for the money, pay for the lessons, and take you to lessons, and obviously music centres and things like that. And it can get quite pricey. But this idea that you could just phone a local band and say, my son or my daughter is interested in playing the trombone, can I pop along? And you get given an instrument and get movement is fantastic, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's one of the big things that attracted me to the Brass Foundations project. This idea that it isn't about who can afford the nice big flash instrument. There are ways of absolutely anybody getting into this world and getting into this kind of music, and I don't think brass bands advertise that nearly widely enough beyond their own environment. And it does seem to come as a bit of a shock to some people. I teach as a Perry in schools, and you talk to schools and you talk to the kids that are there and you talk to parents, and there's genuinely surprise. Oh, I can just go along and they'll help me. And yeah, absolutely, yeah, they will definitely help you. No matter what your background is, no matter what your gender is, and no matter what your playing ability is either. There's this whole thing about I'm not good enough to join a band. Well, you are. So just get along there and we'll help you become. Sorry, I'm slightly distracted. There's an absolutely enormous magpie just walking past my studio window. He's the size of a golden eagle. But there we are. So talking about you getting into the brass band world, then let's spin forward. I'll be kind and say 15, 20 years from going to university and then rocking up in Nailsworth, taking over my old chair as the musical director of Nailsworth Band.
Big shoes to fill, eh?
Well, big feet.
Yeah, well, both of my children got very into brass playing. So my daughter plays the trombone and my son plays the tuba. Yeah, that wasn't expected. When Philip and I got married, we sort of agreed that we were going to have one each, one string player and one brass player. And what do you know? Children seem to have minds of their own. So
crazy idea.
They both love the brass band world, and they've taken part in the Gloucestershire Brass Band Association. And I don't know if you know Steve Legg. He was also conducting Nailsworth.
Yeah.
He just let me know that there was a conducting position going up there, and he sort of suggested that I might give it a try. And it hadn't even really occurred to me. I've conducted before. I conducted Thornbury Band for a while, but this was a long time ago, probably 16, 17 years ago. And it wasn't something that was on my radar of things to do.
Yeah.
But when he suggested it, I suddenly thought, actually, I really enjoyed conducting. It was something that I found very rewarding in a completely different way from playing. I think conducting is so much about communicating. When you perform, obviously, you're waving your arms around and people go, oh, they're not really doing anything. But it's that preparation time beforehand, the rehearsals where you have your vision and you try and communicate that to your band and they get pulled along with you. And then we work together to create an interpretation. I find that really fascinating. So I just went for it. I just had a go and yeah.
It's been successful. You've got them to the first national finals in 100 years. And
yes.
You've got promotion and yeah, it's all good. And I think you are still one of the very few female conductors in the banding world. In the musical world, really. You know, Maren Alsop, who is a bit of a kind of conducting hero of mine, or heroine of mine, recently took over in Vienna, in one of the big orchestras in Vienna. Not the Philharmonic, but the radio orchestra, the Radio Philharmonic Orchestra. And a lot of what she did when she got there was about trying to establish women in that world, because again, a very male-centric world. And she included lots of events aimed at achieving gender equality for composers and conductors by 2030, which chimes really well with BBE. And I'm sure Maren Alsop probably thought about that when she was setting up her thinking. But we have a Challenge 2030 vision to see the makeup of bands more accurately reflect their communities. And obviously the gender mix is going to be part of that. And she set up a lot of lectures and seminars and workshops that were all kind of women-only events. And I just wonder what you feel about that as a way forward for us. Is that the kind of thing you think we should be doing? Should we be encouraging only women to come to conducting seminars or band training seminars or even teaching seminars, things like that?
Yeah, it's definitely a way of doing this. It's a very contentious issue, isn't it? Because when you put something out there, whatever opportunity it is, if you say women only, you're also cutting out people who might want to join. So it is a contentious issue, but I think the thing that the reason it might be successful is because I think a lot of women suffer from a lack of confidence. So they definitely have the tools, they have the skill set, they've definitely got that ability, but they also have this additional lack of self-esteem thing, which slows them down and actually just prevents them putting themselves forward. And maybe in an environment where there aren't lots and lots of men around, being much more confident than them, and having maybe bigger egos even, dare I say it, it might be a more nurturing environment for a woman to try something and to push herself out of the comfort zone. It is hard because that wouldn't necessarily appeal to me, but then I don't have that issue. The reason that I have had self-confidence issues is not because of other men. Right. So it's just a sort of a personal thing completely. I think, when you've grown up in an environment where your parents put a lot of pressure on you to be good and good at everything, you end up with this sort of perfectionist point of view of the world, and you never feel that you meet that standard that you set for yourself. And I think it's only in my 40s that I've started going, well, I think you need to get more of a perspective of what you're able to do. So I do think that there's a place for women only seminars and conducting workshops and things like that, if only to give women the idea that it's possible for them.
It's all right to do it, yeah. And what about us as teachers then? Is it something you think that maybe we should be thinking about from an earlier age in somebody's music career? I'm really conscious as a heavy brass player, as a tuba player and trombone player, that there are an awful lot more girls playing the flute than there are playing the bass trombone. And I do wonder if that's a perception of ladylike instruments and girls can't play that, and that sort of idea, where we need, as teachers, we need to be breaking that down. And again, is that something that we should be thinking about girl-only ensembles in school where they have that chance? Because goodness me, if adult female musicians have issues about self-confidence, teenage girls certainly will have that issue in a mixed context. So, I mean, how do you think your daughter might react to being asked to play in a female-only ensemble as opposed to a mixed ensemble, for instance?
A 13-year-old girl definitely wouldn't be interested unless there were boys there. Okay. No, I'm only kidding. I think it would be. I think you would struggle though to find those girls who are playing tubas and trombones, and I'm not sure that in a school environment, especially if it's a mixed school, that saying this ensemble is only for girls is actually the way forward. I think cutting out a whole group of students who also want to be given those opportunities. What do you do then? Do you have a male-only ensemble as well? Or, the point of music to me is getting as many people together from all different walks of life, different genders, different ages, and putting them together and making music together. So I know why it's an idea. I understand that, and I'm not sure how workable that would be, especially in the school.
I couldn't agree with you more that the whole point of music is getting people from everywhere and all sorts of people together. And I would never suggest that would be the only environment that girls could play in. But I'm just thinking through the whole idea of, well, how do we make our bands, our school bands, and our adult bands, how do we make them more representative of their communities? And I do wonder as well whether it's something that the bigger bands can take on. I know, looking at the makeup of the top bands in the country now compared to what they were like when I was 18, it's changed. It's changed massively. But going back to Maren Alsop and the Vienna orchestras, the Vienna Phil only allowed female players in 1997. And by 2013, there were still only 6 full-time positions out of about 150 within the orchestra. So it doesn't seem to be in the orchestral world that it's the big boys that are changing things. It happens further down. And I'm wondering if that's something that we need to promote more or even shout about more, because I do think that there are a lot of bands, yours one of them, and when I conducted Nailsworth, there were a lot of women played in the band, and I see it more, I think, in the lower sections. So maybe we need to shout more about the fact that we are gender neutral, if you like, and also shout about our role models in the bigger bands. So the Helen Williams and Shona Whites of this world, do we need to get them out there more shamelessly?
Yeah, I think so. I think role models is the most important thing. So one of the reasons actually that I took on the job of conducting Nailsworth was, at the time I suddenly thought, do I actually have a duty to do some conducting? Because if we're on the bandstand out there in the park, and if even one girl sees me conducting and thinks, oh, that's a thing women can do, that will have been worth it for me. And I think having people like Helen Williams and Elsa and Shona White sort of going out there into the community and showing girls that playing brass instruments and being a musician and having a sort of prominent position in these musical ensembles is possible. I think that's the first step, isn't it, to changing a mindset. And I don't think it's going to be fast. It takes a long time to make these changes, and it will happen, I hope. But it has to happen at the grassroots level, right at the beginning, and make sure that children don't have preconceptions of what's okay for boys to play and what's okay for girls to play. Yeah. And that boys maybe they can go further just because they're more confident, or having those preconceptions just puts that glass ceiling and puts those girls in a box, I think. And I realized until recently that I had those glass ceilings as well, and I didn't even know they were there. I assumed that they weren't because I looked up and I thought I could see the sky. But actually, we're all ingrained to repeat what our parents say and repeat what people around us think and assume that they're our own ideas, and they're not.
Yeah, and it is difficult to be the first to do anything, isn't it? And to be the people who are suggesting that what is happening on a daily basis might not actually be the right thing. And I'm looking in the wider brass band world as well, that I'm not aware of terribly many female adjudicators, for instance.
Because there aren't many female conductors, and people tend to go sideways.
Yeah, it's that argument that says you can't have a female High Court judge until women have been lawyers for however long it takes to become a High Court judge. And
yeah, you see, I find that really interesting, because if you think about the skill set of an adjudicator, it's basically the skill set of a teacher. Mm-hmm. Somebody who listens to something, makes a very quick judgment based on all their knowledge and all their understanding of what's required. And yet, if you look at a primary school, the average primary school, I know is a bit different now, but they were mainly women.
Yeah.
But then if you look at a primary school and you hear that there's one male teacher in it, you will find that male teacher is often the head teacher. So you get this bizarre sort of situation where, although there are loads and loads of women teaching, they don't realise that their skill set can go sideways into lots of other jobs as well, and that they've got the ability to do those things. But yeah, that's a common theme, isn't it? Same with the cooking. A lot of women do the cooking at home, but if you were asked to name one famous female chef,
yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? And I'd never really thought about adjudicators being akin to teachers, but you're absolutely right. It's that ability to quickly assimilate and give a thoughtful response to an action, whatever that action might be.
Constructive response as well.
Yes, well, Sometimes.
I think, yeah.
I think that's, and I wonder if that's a challenge maybe to the Adjudicators Association to think about, and I have no idea what they ask for because I've absolutely no interest in being an adjudicator at any stage in my life. But I'm curious as to what they think the skill set for adjudicators is, and is having played at the very highest level a part of that, or is it about how you assimilate the information that's being given to you quickly and provide honest and constructive feedback on it? Because I think, particularly in the lower reaches of the banding world, in the lower sections, that's what we really need. We really need the encouragement that wants particularly young players to go back to the next contest.
Exactly, which is why that feedback needs to be so constructive. And I think that having played at a top level in bands doesn't necessarily give you the skill set to be a good adjudicator. You know, that's not a given. In the same way that lots of people who've played in bands kind of move into conducting, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good conductor just because you're able to play your instrument well. So,
absolutely. We have all sat in front of people who are magnificent musicians, but couldn't conduct electricity. And it's a kind of like football, isn't it? That just because you're a great player doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager. And I'm just wondering as well about repertoire. Another part of the levelling up, to use that horrendous phrase that our government uses, is that we don't really see much music written for brass bands by female composers, and I do wonder whether that's about confidence again, but confidence from the bands and giving them the librarian or whoever the ability to say, actually, we're going to try some new stuff. And I think it might be part of a wider contemporizing of the brass band repertoire and the brass band libraries, that if we play more contemporary music, then by default, we're going to end up having more female composers involved in that. Is it something that you consider when you're programming anything? Who wrote it, or does it just happen? It should be, to my mind, it should be, is the music any good? But it's that whole positive discrimination aspect. Do we need that?
It is I think this is the most contentious issue, because we need to get a balance here. Of course, female composers should be allowed the same opportunities as male composers. But what I feel is the danger is to put female composers into your program simply on the basis that they're female, because actually, as a female myself, I find that really patronizing. And I know that a lot of people don't agree with me, and a lot of people say no, but we've had such imbalance for so many centuries that, you know, even if it requires positive discrimination, we need to change things up. But really, when I listen to music, I don't think of gender. I just think of, do I think this is a good piece of music? Do I think it fits into our program? I think the ideal, the utopia of the future is to be able to judge things just based on their quality and not bring gender into it at all. Unfortunately, that hasn't worked, has it, thus far, for centuries? But like I was saying earlier, I think it's just going to take a lot of time.
And I think you're right. I think the ideal is absolutely that it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Unfortunately, at the moment, it does matter. And I think what does help, not just about gender equality, but also about the more wider access issues that we have in music generally, not just in bands, and in the arts generally. I spent many years working in theatre, and it's that idea that there's nothing there for the likes of me. Now, we can all sit quite comfortably and say, well, anybody's welcome in my band, or anybody's welcome in my theatre. but actually that's not addressing the fact that, well, we can say that, but there are so many people out there who don't believe us, and we have to prove it to them. And I think we are becoming more aware that we need to be more proactive than just saying, well, the doors are open and you come.
Yeah.
And I think going out to encourage girls to play musical instruments, and like you said about, you know, somebody, one girl passing you in the park saying, oh, I can do that. So I can conduct, I can play music, I can write music. It's about kind of shouting about that this really is open to everybody, especially you.
Yeah. So doing by no, what's the word? You're demonstrating what's possible. I think that's the most important thing, to do it as much as possible.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is actually to find out what it is that prevents women who have the skills and have the ability from putting themselves forward. I think that is the real nub of the matter, because if you take, you know, just a section of society, there'll be perfectly able women and perfectly able men, but the women will hang back. You know, a lot of them will hang back. And why is that? What are their experiences? What are the obstacles they feel are in their path? Whether those obstacles are real or not, why do they feel that they are there? And I think that that's actually quite a complex issue. And when you bring it up, I think it's important that men are involved in that conversation as well. So that's why I always feel a little bit anxious about hearing, oh, we're going to have a female only this and a female only that, because actually what you do then is you prevent the men around those females from understanding how it is for the females. Yeah. So, you know, if there's something that men say a lot that make women feel, you know, underconfident, then men need to know that. They might not mean to be saying those things, and they might not have that intended consequence. But it's all about education, I think, educating everybody to understand their place in the world.
And I absolutely see the point that if you create a single gender environment of any kind, then people are going to act differently. And if that's, you know, the rugby club kind of feel to it, men act very differently when they're in a male-only environment than they do when they're in a mixed environment. And similarly, I expect that if the problem, or if the barrier to women stepping forward and putting themselves forward and being more confident is the fact that there is language or behavior in a mixed environment that stops them doing that, then just removing that doesn't actually solve the problem if it's temporary.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that demonizing men and saying that this is why women can't succeed is also a really dangerous path. It's a very thin ice. I think it's not as simple as that. It really isn't that simple. So, yeah.
I'm really glad that we chose this simple, straightforward subject to chat about for half an hour, because I think we've sorted it now.
Yeah.
It's the whole equality thing fascinates me, and I'm intrigued and horrified and delighted in equal measure every time I have these kind of conversations. But we do need to finish, unfortunately. Our half hour is over, so we can continue this conversation further and for many, many years, I think, until we get it absolutely nailed. But do you have, Anri, any kind of final thoughts on being a female leader in what is still traditionally a kind of male-dominated world?
I would just say that I'm really glad that I took on this role. I love it. I found my band to be nothing but welcoming and supportive. And I think that the more you do something, the more you realise that those problems you thought were there might not actually be there, that they might just be issues that you've you've kind of created in your head, or that are outdated actually, and that things that you experienced 20, 30 years ago aren't happening anymore. And therefore I would say to anyone who's worried or considering pushing themselves out of their comfort zone, to just do it, and see what rewards you can reap from that.
Great. Thank you very much, Anri. Lovely to talk to you. And it's always good when a string player comes over to the dark side. We've got you now. You're one of ours now.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Great to see you. And there are more webinars and seminars and interesting conversations coming up with BBE. So do have a look on our website for all the details there. And we will see you again next Monday. Goodbye.